Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick, and today we have CJ Jouhal, who's the head of engineering at Anchorage Digital. CJ is a security engineer with more than 2 decades of experience in technical and project leadership. And most recently, he was the CTO of Clear, where we scaled the engineering team to the IPO in 2021. He's also been a leader at Amazon's Audible, eBay, and ZocDoc. For those of you that don't know, Anchorage Digital is a digital asset platform for investors. It provides crypto-native financial solutions from custody and trading to staking, governance, and financing. Last publicly valued at more than $3 billion, Anchorage Digital serves some of the largest institutional investors and enterprise brands in the digital asset space. Thanks for coming on the show, CJ.
That is some intro. I love it, CJ. Look at that. That's not only do you have the red wall, you have the red carpet rolled out for you. This is big, man. This is huge. But in all seriousness, you have a really eclectic, skill set, different companies you've worked for. So maybe you could kind of give some advice to people, people who are worried about their jobs, thinking about layoffs, hiring freezes, everything going on. How can you talk a little bit about your journey and what made you decide to work at different companies? And I understand some of it may seem counterintuitive.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start from the beginning because it for me, it was a great start to a career. I started with at a large scale defense industry company, right? Lockheed Martin. So that was my first job out of college. I looked at it and I'm like, okay, I'm joining this huge company. I'm going to learn how to become a programmer and I'm going to become a software engineer through and through. And Lockheed Martin, they have a tremendous variety of opportunities available to you. So what they do is they have leadership development. They have sort of projects that are super interesting. So for me, I dove right in, got put on a project that was really, I thought cool. I was actually working on a software program that was analyzing data from satellites to detect failures. And these are billion-dollar satellites that are in space, and I'm writing the algorithm.
You're just out of college doing this, by the way, right?
I know. And I was like, this is amazing. So I was so excited about that. Went in for my first code review, and Lockheed Martin at that time, their code reviews were, hey, there's a bunch of guys sitting across the desk from you. They put your code up on a screen and they start to rip it apart. Oh, and it was, I think, a couple of hours. And I went home. I think I called my mom up and I'm like, I think I got into the wrong business. Oh, they ripped me apart and it was demotivating. And I was like, I think I'm not good at this. And it was tough because they don't prepare you for feedback. They don't teach you how to take feedback. This was purely like, this code sucks. I can't believe you wrote this. I can't believe you did that. So it was very, when you think about feedback, knowing how to receive it, but also how to give it. So it's not coming down condescending that way. No training on that. Literally my first job. And I'm having second thoughts. My mom was like, thick skin, it's part of Indian culture. You need to do this. You need to be, think about things. I'm like, you know what? You're right. First step, misstep doesn't have to be the wrong step. And so I went back, just kept working hard. And while I was at Lockheed, I actually went and got my master's in engineering in parallel while working full time. So that was, I think, just motivated me to let me move forward. Right after Lockheed Martin and learned a lot of great things, I looked to change jobs and I had an opportunity at a startup. And what was interesting is this was the first decision point in my career. And you're talking only 2 years out of college. Lockheed Martin, director of engineering, came up to me. He's like, love your energy, love your skills. We want you to stay. If I gave you a blank check for title, management, whatever you want, what would you do? My response to him was, I appreciate it, but I'm too young. I want to learn. So no, I'm not going to manage. I'm not going to take that blank check opportunity. I need to still learn, hone my craft and art before I learn how to become a leader. You need to know your skill. And 2 years out of college, I made that decision, and most people would jump at that opportunity. I said, no, I need to make sure I am good at what I do. Joined a startup, half.com, whirlwind. I mean, I joined 3 months later, eBay bought us and was now not just at a fast-paced startup, but eBay. And there I learned engineering to a T. Like, you learn scale, you need hard skills around this, and it was very delivery focused. So I learned my craft well. After about 4 or 5 years or so at eBay, I wanted the actual opportunity to lead and manage, and they gave me the opportunity to lead a team. But at that time at eBay, they decided they did not believe in remote managers. So for me to actually get a manager title, I had to move to San Jose or just manage the team without the title. So I did that. I was like, all right, I don't need the title. I'm not ready to move. So I led and learned the skills of managing a team in India, small team in the US, just being a lead engineer for a year or so. And what I told my boss was like, hey, let me show you my skill. Let me show you that me being remote is not a challenge. And if I prove my worth in 12 months, make me a manager. He agreed. I delivered everything on my part. He was not able to make me a manager.
Ooh.
Again, HR policies, those types of things. It was a setback. And I said, you know what? I'm not sure what to do. So actually, a couple of friends reached out. I decided to do my own startup. So I left eBay and went to do a startup, Diac. It was an online recruiting platform. Great experience. It was not a success, but I learned everything because I was the founding CTO. For me, I learned how to do every aspect of the system. So database, network, you talk about all the hard skills, I learned it holistically. And it was a great experience for me because I became well-rounded. The startup ended up not being successful, but I ended up like, okay, I need to take a break. I've been in the fast-paced world for quite some time. I decided, let me go join a financial services company and learn at a little bit of a slower pace. And it was interesting. I joined this company, Delaga Landon. They're capital leasing. And two things there. One, I took a pay cut, which was unheard of at that time, but I was like, I wanted to learn from an established leader. I really liked the leader there. Yeah, her name was Christina Benedetto, and her approach to understanding financials, managing up, I wanted to learn. So for me, joining, that was more of a learning opportunity. And the ability to formally manage 5, 6 people on a team was important because in my startup, like, no one's giving me feedback. You're just running it. Everyone's heads down executing. You're not learning true leadership because no one's telling you, hey, HR is not there to say, hey, you messed up. You did this wrong. So going into a formal environment was important. This is where actually I learned management of people the right way, and I hit rock bottom as well. I was at Delaga Landon for about a little over 2 years, and about a few months in, I remember this distinctly because it was a low point in my career. I was coming home from dinner, had a employee call me, probably a little inebriated, but was upset and literally cursed me out and said, "You are the worst manager I have ever had." And I was bullish, I was cocky, young, and I'm like, okay, what is it? And he said, all you do is tell us to execute, do. You never thank us. You never appreciate us. And I said, if you want a cheerleader, go find someone else. I'm here to get a job done. And I hung up. And next day, that employee, without a job lined up, quit. And that was my low point. I realized that I could not be a leader the way I was a software engineer. You can't just execute. You can't just do things one way. So I spent a lot of time like retroing myself and saying, okay, you kind of don't know how to manage and lead. So I spent actually, I left Alagoland and joined eBay as a manager and rejoined eBay. They had just bought a company, GSI Commerce in King of Prussia. I joined there and I spent 2.5, 3 years reprogramming myself. I read every leadership book, every EQ book, everything that I could do. I scripted my one-on-ones. I made sure that I spent 5 to 10 minutes before each one-on-one to say, hey, this is so-and-so, ask her about her family, ask her about her dog, ask her about her kids. This made sure that I was just reprogramming myself because I was an engineer with someone who had grown, raised by my grandfather who was from a military background. So like connecting emotionally was not a skill that I had, but I had to program it. So I spent 3 years just doing that and became a leader who could lead with empathy, lead with compassion. And I think it was a turning point in my career because I joined eBay managing a team of 5 to 6 engineers. In a year and a half, I was managing 400 plus.
Wow.
And I learned, now I had to learn a different skill, which was not just managing teams, but managing leaders, which is a whole different bar. And it was interesting because I, again, had some setbacks. I'm very technical. I dive deep and I expected everyone to be exactly like me. That's a falsehood. You can't expect everyone to be exactly like you. You have to understand the strengths and weaknesses and play off of those. But I didn't realize that. So everyone that was not like me, I managed them out. And while I was able to execute, I was able to deliver, I was able to gain the respect of engineering, I didn't actually learn how to manage diverse people who came in bringing different sets of skills to the table, and how do I balance their strengths and weaknesses rather than just look for the one unicorn each time.
CJ, if I could just interject for a sec and to reframe it, I feel bad that you said it's your low point, because from the outside perspective, and Rick, I bet you feel the same way, it really wasn't you, because it should be the company and the leadership of these companies to help you become a better manager. Because what I see happen a lot of times, not only in the workforce, but think about sports. How often do you see a great, let's say baseball player, right? Fantastic all-star. When they retire, they become a manager. And they just assume because they're a great baseball player, they're going to be a great manager, and it doesn't work out. And then they're surprised why it didn't work out, because no one kind of gave them the time and effort to train them how to do it. So in a way, it's, from the out, Rick, tell me if I'm wrong. It's really not your feeling a low point. It's just the management team at your company should have took you aside and said, hey, we think highly of you. You're a great technician. You're a great engineer. Let us help you with the softer skills. And let's work on it. But they didn't. So as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, 25-year-old, 26, even a 30-year-old, like that's hard to figure out on your own whilst doing all the work. You know what I mean? So just for what it's worth from the outside, not to take it to heart and let it buy it, because I think this is more of a failing of what goes on with a lot of these companies.
I agree. I think that that's one of the things that I've focused on quite a bit recently in my career is that make sure every leader has the basic tools in their tool belt.
Yes.
You need to provide them with that and then expect them to step up. But if you don't give them the basic tools, you cannot expect them to lead. So,
right. And you were doing remote work before that was fashionable. So like you were a remote leader before anyone did remote work. So like
I was
even now people can't figure out how to manage remotely. And you were doing it as a young guy. So like
Yeah,
That was hard
it
stuff.
was 2005. I was doing remote. I spent 2 years remote with eBay, and it was amazing because I did travel to San Jose, but definitely for me managing times, making sure I was diligent, and because I worked out of my house. But continuing, at eBay I got to a point where I was executing, but I actually felt I was too far just executing, not being strategic, not getting in. My passion is still technology. That's what keeps me going. So um, at that point, Amazon Audibles division of Amazon reached out and said, "Hey, greenfield opportunity. Come build something for us." And I said, "You know what? Let me go try this." Tried it, and what was interesting is they were like very, very early. And I'm, I joined, and about I think a month in, I told them, I said, "I think I'm going to leave." They're like, "Why?" I said, "I think you hired me too soon. The project's not ready. The product's not ready, and I'm not a person who's going to spend my time 10% allocated towards you. I'll if this was too early, I'm fine with walking away from the
You don't want to do
opportunity."
fake work and like vanity projects or vanity work, all the
No,
things
so
people are talking about now, right?
so they the CIO of the division, he appreciated that. He's like, "Give me 30 days." I said, "Sure." So I gave them 30 days, and they handed over the platform to me, like the API platform portion. So there were some technical challenges. Learned, I think Amazon has a great culture of teaching. Learned the technical side. Was able to have the tools for my leaders that reported into me to understand how leading and managing is. What was interesting is from there, ZocDoc lured me away, and ZocDoc, it was a growth opportunity, scaling up. Um, when I joined ZocDoc, they wanted to go towards more operational lean, and I wanted to be in a growth environment. So we decided to separate ways. And it was tough because I remember the president asking me, like, "Is this the right fit for you?" And I said, "I'm not sure, but let's go and come back." And we both like kind of arrived at the same decision that this was not the right fit. So went to join actually Clear, and at that point I was at that VP SVP level for a small startup, and at Clear it was a huge opportunity for a company that was looking to become more product engineering driven, looking to become a platform and a technology company, and wanted someone to come in and grow, scale, and of course help with that culture change. So I'd never done, to be honest, a culture change like that before. So it was like an interesting challenge. And um, joining Clear, 5 months after I joined Clear, the pandemic hit. So a company where it's 90+% of its revenue was coming from the travel space, and the pandemic hits, and it's like, oh wow. So you see headwinds, and luckily, cash flow positive company had savings to endure the pandemic, but allowed us to re-platform. But this is where I actually had like a lot of lessons learned on hiring leaders and what to look for. How do you balance strengths and weaknesses of leaders? I made some hiring mistakes, and that happens. But it's humbling to be a part of an organization that gives you the opportunity to become the CTO, invest in leaders, make mistakes, and allow you to learn from those mistakes too. So for me, I got that opportunity at Clear. Clear was a whirlwind because it went public. So I went from joining as the VP of engineering to CTO to taking the company public as the CTO. With Clear, I felt like I'd gotten to a point where technology platform was getting to a maturity level. They were looking for next level of global growth, and I was looking for kind of the next technology challenge. So Anchorage Digital came along, very similar startup story where they wildly successful, were growing, wanted to have someone come in as head of engineering to bring maturity to their organization. And for me, one thing that bodes well for me is that I've been at every scale of company. I've done the 15, 20% person startup that I had my own, eBay, Amazon, ZocDoc, Clear. So you look at this, and now I want to tell you the method behind the madness of my career choices. So one thing that I did is a friend of mine once told me, he was an executive at DeLaga Landon, and he told me, he's like, hey, I try to change every 3 to 4 years, industry, company, something like that, because it gives me a different challenge. It allows me to stretch different muscles. And instead of different companies, I actually made it a passion of mine to say different industry each time. So I went from like HR recruiting platform, financial services, to e-commerce platform, to media company, to healthcare company, to biometric security company, and now to crypto. So every 2 to 3 years, I changed this industry. What this changed my industry. What that allowed me to do was a few things. One is based on the scales of companies I was at, and based on the industries, people cannot say that I don't know how to lead the size of company that they're looking for, or the industry, because I've shown I can be successful regardless of those two.
It's definitely a very interesting, unique way of looking at it, because most people, I think, would be chasing the money, right? They would be chasing, okay, where am I going to get the most bucks? I'll stay wherever if they're going to pay me, or become a manager and then manage more people and more people, more people. But it sounds like you really pursued more of an intellectual bent. Like, what can I learn? How can I better myself? How can I challenge myself? Which is an interesting way where a lot of people, I got to tell you, a lot of people don't go that way. They're looking, how can I be a manager? How can I make a lot of money and all that?
It's interesting. I still love interviewing. And I was interviewing someone when I think they were at ZocDoc interviewing, and they asked me, they're like, well, here's the dollars I'm getting at Bloomberg. I'm like, okay, but here's what I can offer you. I can offer you this base, but I can offer you an opportunity to grow, have impact, and develop as an individual and an engineer. I said, you can chase money. There's going to be companies who will always pay you what you want, but they're not going to necessarily make you a well-rounded individual. And impact, if you care about impact, and that's what I chased. I chased impact every single time. And I think people start to conflate a couple things. They think like title and impact go together. They don't. You can be a software engineer 5 years out of college, and you can put CTO on your title on LinkedIn. No one's going to know the difference. But can you know how to make that impact of a CTO? That's the main difference. It's not the title, it's what you bring to the table. And I always tell people, like, if you try to negotiate title as part of the interview, you're actually already starting off on the wrong foot.
CJ, what is the kind of impact that a CTO should make?
It's interesting. My leadership style is situational. My approach to being a CTO is also situational. Like, there's companies that are at different stages and they need different things. And an example here at Anchorage Digital, they need maturity. They need how we've grown quite a bit from a hiring perspective. How do we scale productivity to match that hiring growth? How do we mature our processes to get there? The strategy and vision for the company is set. The technology strategy is also fairly well defined. So from that perspective, I didn't need to flex the technical strategy muscle. I need to struck the more organizational and process muscle here. Versus at my previous company at Clear, definitely a lot more technical. So we were hiring and growing, but really the biggest challenge was, how do we have a technology strategy to go from A to B? So, and so each situation, I think the CTO has to assess what does the company need, and apply that appropriately. And it doesn't mean, Jack, you have to have everything coming with you. If I am, for example, a strategy person, versus an execute. The company needs someone to execute. You make sure you hire the people who can execute. And a lot of CTOs feel like they need to do everything themselves. You don't. You have to make sure you have your leadership team that can fill those gaps.
So if I'm like a senior software engineer and I'm deciding between kind of two career paths, whether to go down the manager route or try to become like a super individual contributor and become like a staff software engineer, it seemed like, looking from your career arc, you knew early on that, you were presented with a blank check at Lockheed Martin, right? Title, project, money, anything that you wanted. And you had the maturity to step away and go somewhere else, right? And so can you, like my hypothetical senior software engineer, like what are the things that they should be thinking about in terms of the skills that they should be building, the questions that they should be asking themselves before they go down one route or the other?
It's a great question. And for me, I break it down into a couple of things. One is the number one thing as a budding leader, as someone who's emerging as in leadership, you have to earn the trust of the people you're leading. That is, in my opinion, table stakes. People have to respect you and you have to earn their trust. And if you're going to do those two things, establish those two things, you have to have the skill. Engineering is such where if I don't bring some level of hard skill knowledge to the table, it's hard to earn the trust and respect of the engineering. So I do think that people who are looking at that, make sure that you have mastered your hard skill well enough so that you can command trust and respect. And I think that the other side is your soft skills. One thing that I feel, I read this is authentic relationships are the best. And building an authentic relationship is hard. So you have to learn the soft skills so that I can connect with you at the right level, so that when I give you feedback, I'm saying it because I want you to succeed. And that's a big difference. And I think everyone has read books about radical candor and how to give feedback, etc. But what a lot of these miss is that authentic relationship building starts up front, and only then can you be radically candid. Only then can you be critical about feedback. I think that I've had some of the hardest conversations with people, but they know when I give a lot of that feedback, it is out of their best interest. It's because I want to see them succeed. I always tell people that I guarantee the company is going to get value out of you. What's the value you're getting out of the company? That's feedback, that's growth, that's impact. So when a leader gives feedback, make sure is that feedback that is going to give you growth. Because again, as a leader, I'm getting my dollar out of you from programming. What's the reverse? And another thing I do, Rick, is this is an interesting concept that I have applied throughout my career. I still do this to this day, and I tell everyone that reports into me to do this. Every December, I update my resume. Every December, still, because I want to look at what have I accomplished. It's fresh in your mind when you retro the year. What's fresh? What did you do? Now, when you're emerging in your career, especially as a senior engineer, all the way to even emerging leaders like senior managers, directors, when you do that, ask yourself a few questions. One, do I like what I accomplished this year? Two, is my career headed in the right direction where I want it to go? Three, would I hire the person that's on this resume? If there's no to any one of those three questions, you got to go talk to your manager. Got to talk to that leader and say, hey, here's the thing that's misaligned. And now allow them to have them give them the opportunity to address the gaps. The reason why I say I do it every 12 months is because next year, when you do it again in December, if you say no to the same question, your leader did not listen and did not present the opportunity. Now you know the company's not looking out for you. Now the company is not, they're getting value out of you, but you're not getting that same value back because of what you wanted. You can start to look. Why? Because now maximum 12 to 13 months off track.
Let me ask you this, CJ.
Versus people who spend years in a job off track and then realize, oh, I'm off track and I didn't even know I was off track.
CJ, let me ask you this, and Rick, I'm curious about your thoughts too. Tell me if I'm kind of off base, but it seems you're coming from a space, CJ, of confidence and you've mastered your craft. So it seems like you're able to look at your resume and say, hey, I'm looking at 3 different points. If I'm not happy, I'm going to do it. What about somebody who is smart, but not at the top of their game? Are there ways they can do it? Because it sounds like you have the ability to choose what to do, where to go, who to work with, but a lot of people don't. Like, how is it that they just have to master their craft, or are there other ways?
I think there is, if you can still apply the same approach, right? If I'm a software engineer and I'm saying, hey, my goal is to go down the IC track, right? That's what's passionate for me. Then you should look at it and say, okay, the IC track, what does the IC track mean? IC track means that I'm getting deeper into programming, I'm programming harder concepts, and I'm helping with lead architect design, etc. So when you do your 12-month December checkpoint, you should say, like, okay, am I progressing? Was I put on a hard project? Did I drive design or something? If I didn't, I can go to my manager and say, hey, give me a design opportunity. Even if it's paired with someone, allow me to get that exposure for design, because I want that on my resume. I want to be able to market. And guess one thing that managers and leaders should absolutely appreciate on this is that listening to the person and meeting them with their ask means retention. If I am getting everything out of my current company, they're progressing my career, I will not look to leave.
See, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is that you don't have to be the best of the best of the best, but you're on a learning curve. So that if you're an individual contributor, whether it's tech or any other industry, to say, how can I do the best job I can? And if I'm not, I should go to my boss, my manager, others, and say, how can I get to that next level? How can I learn new things? So you could ultimately get to the point where you want to do, and where you can call your own shots and you can decide where to go. So you just have to be the best version of yourself at that particular time and keep leveling up, I guess, right? Is that?
Yeah. And there's different paths to get there, which is, I think, why this every December resume retro question applies, because I don't want to sort of minimize people who spend years at a company because they may be loyal, dedicated, they're happy with what they're doing. That's great, but make sure you're still relevant. I've seen too many people who spend 5 years, 10 years at a company, and suddenly they're like, oh, I may be at risk because of a reduction in force. I may be just wanting to, life situation changes, so I have to look for a different job. And suddenly my skills are not up to date. I may not be market relevant. So you can be in the same company and accomplish that with this very simple approach.
Rick, do you see people on Blind? Like, it seems a little different, I notice, than the folks look at their careers. Am I off?
I'm sorry. In what way?
I don't, it seems that, let's say I'm blind, oftentimes you'll see, hey, do I go to Amazon? Do I go to Apple? Or what's going to be my total compensation? As opposed to CJ is looking, here's my challenges. I want to take on something new, fresh, different. I'm not going to be impressed by a label. I'm going to just find what's really cool and interesting to me.
Yeah, I think the concern there on Blind is there's a lot of highly motivated professionals that, you know, they code day in and day out. They studied computer science. They do coding challenges on the side that they practice, right? And so they get into this habit of they feel like they're on the top of the game and that their companies haven't given them enough, right? And so they are optimizing for either work-life balance, right? Like where are the places that are going to be remote, leave me alone so I can just do my job, log off, or alternatively, they're optimizing for higher and higher compensation, right? Like what's the next company that might become a public company where I can cash out these like lottery tickets that are called my stock options,
Yeah.
right? And so I think there's a sense that in their toolbox, so to speak, that they already have quite the tools already, right? And you know, they feel like, oh well, I'm already programming in the latest languages, right? I'm already working on pretty decent sized projects just by virtue of, you know, if you're at Google, even if you're on the like crummiest project, that project has immediate scale,
Yeah.
right? Where there's a billion users automatically. And so there's almost this kind of sense of like, well, like, how do I squeeze this orange and get every drop of juice?
It's what you're describing is more like what do they value in tandem,
Right.
and it's interesting because some of the more I think harder, challenging individuals that I've managed weren't able to always articulate what they valued.
Mm.
So you're not able to quickly say, oh, there's no step ladder here, right? It's like you have to carve a unique path. So I remember one individual at Amazon, and they, in the end, after like several conversations, I realized the biggest driver for them was recognition. It was not the dollar, it was not the challenge, but they wanted to be acknowledged. So I made sure there was a path to that. That at an all quarterly all hands, they got their name called out. Those types of things, because and so I think from a leadership perspective, it is some individuals do not know the path. I had an individual once who 100% wanted to be a manager. My instinct, all the data pointed to me saying, no, he's a better individual contributor. Guided them, but they were adamant because in their head, it was programmed by society, by corporate
Be a
America.
manager, then a manager, more manager.
Salary goes up, and that's the ladder. And I told him, I said, okay, that's fine, but here's the things you must hit and establish to show. And by the way, here's what you do for an IC path. Here's what you do for a management path. And they chose the management path. And I'm going to be supportive. But where I think they would have gone to that next level on the IC path in 12 months, it took them 2 years to become a manager. And after I left Amazon, I found out about a year and a half later, they reverted back to the IC path. And sometimes you need to allow a person to make that mistake, allow them to learn from that. But it's a tough transition back from leadership to IC. But for me, the main point is that I think you have to always understand what motivates the individual. And your job as a leader is to help them navigate that. Not everyone knows, not everyone is aware what drives them. So if someone is looking to become a leader purely because of compensation, you should, as a leader, find out that's the driving factor and show them a path on the IC side that can get them the same compensation.
Yeah, that's a really smart observation, because if somebody just wants recognition and the company doesn't offer that, the person could be amazing, and they're just going to feel so frustrated. They're not even asking for more money. They're not asking for a management position. All they want to do is say, hey, CJ, thank you. You know, you did a great job. You were wonderful. You did a great presentation, whatever it may be. And that's kind of the easiest thing to do. You mentioned early in the conversation about table stakes. That's the easiest table stake, just to be nice and acknowledge, right? So we got to kind of hone in on that.
It's, I think, one of the things that prevents leaders from being amazing. Because I truly do believe that every person who is in a leadership role could be amazing, is that time. And because if you're allotted the time, if you make the time to to look at things and make yourself better, you will become a good leader. You will invest and you'll make the right decisions. But a lot of leaders get caught up, and I did this early in my career, just executing. I'm going to spend 40 hours a week just executing, getting the job done, not realizing that leadership is not just getting the job done. It is cultivating the careers of the people that report into you. And we don't prioritize that. So if you're not going to prioritize even 10 to 15%, I use this example, Jack. I ask people who want to further their career, I said, okay, how much do you invest weekly in yourself? Just give me like time. And like reading, whatever, investing in yourself. And most people will answer like 0. And what makes you think that without investing some amount of time in yourself, you're going to progress? You spend 40, 50, 60 hours in a job. Apply 10% towards yourself. 10% is all I would ask to invest in yourself, both leaders and individuals. And you'll be amazed. Now, if I work 50 hours a week, I'm now saying 5 hours of intellectual stimulation and growth.
Which is nothing in the scheme of it, right?
Exactly.
Nothing.
But people don't do it. They expect that growth to come just because I'm working 50 hours a week doing my job. It's not how it works.
Yeah,
I'm
curious.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
I'm curious on the topic of like promotions and like leveling up. Did you find that it was easier to kind of level up professionally by switching industries, switching companies, or staying at the same company?
That's a great question. Actually, when I look back at it, my promotions came at the companies that recognized my performance. So I think that when you look at it, this is which makes it tricky, Rick, to answer the question. If I'm performing at a senior software engineer level, my company doesn't see it, that's on the company. If I'm not performing at a senior software level, like that's the thing is if I'm performing at a senior software engineer level, yes, I can probably pass that interview for a senior software engineer. So it's not really a promotion, it's what you were at. So I think there's two things that people conflate. It's that what your capability is, where your performance is at, and are you actually at that title and level or not? And for me, I think title chasing is getting boring in the industry, to be honest. There's corporate career ladders that are this many deep, that whatnot. I'm at Anchorage Digital, we take a very different approach. There's not levels. You're a member of technical staff, and your compensation and equity changes based on impact.
That's really interesting. Wait, so it's not like you have level X, level Y, whatever.
Everyone
it's
is
all
member of technical staff.
And then you just have to prove yourself.
Yeah, and of course we have ways to evaluate, but the thing is when a leader sees that someone is stepping up and making a bigger impact, they submit a request for recognition of their contribution and appropriately a compensation change. This is an approach that Anchorage Digital had already established. I love it. I bought, lock, stock, and barrel. I was on board because in my career, I've seen so much career ladders and career ladder chasing. I had an individual who wanted to be promoted and literally would meet with me every quarter, only talking about how do I get promoted? How do I get promoted? And I'm like, and I would tell him, you're focused on the wrong thing. Here's the things you need to accomplish. You accomplish those things, everything will happen organically. Have the impact.
That's such an interesting, different twist on it. So basically, the theory is this: Rick and Jack are going to really work our butts off to be the best we can be. So then we can go in and just show our work. And the managers will say, yes, we're going to give you, more money, more compensation, whatever, because you guys are killing it. And we want to keep you, and we want to make you happy, as opposed to having to chase a specific ladder and decide, to go the management route or whatever it may be. You could just be really good at what you do and exceed expectations, and then you get rewarded for it, which actually makes more sense than anything, doesn't it, in a way, right?
It makes a lot of sense, though. It is hard to execute because 99% of the industry does not work that way.
Yeah.
So when you hire people, they're like, well, what's my next level up? What do I do? Where do I sit in the? I'm like, no, you don't sit anywhere in any ladder. You make impact, you move up.
Because this society puts us in that way. It's like you go to a party, right? What are you? Oh, I'm a vice president of this. I'm like, you lead, not with like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a dog cat owner. It's more of, I'm a VP of, finance, I'm a this. And you get so boxed into it. That's how you think. It's society does put you in the, have you guys seen that thing with something with law firms where they're asking like the minimum what to do? It's like insane what to do. Just so you can have bragging rights that I'm at the top law firm, but like the life quality is just horrendous.
It's this measurement by some level of the weird metric, and people have to understand. I'm an engineer. Metrics can be false positives. You're supposed to have a contextual view of that metric so you understand what is truly going on.
I really appreciate that advice, because I think there's this trap. I certainly got into it early in my career, where I found ladders to be incredibly helpful, right? Where it gave me this template, and there was this comfort in, oh, well, as long as I basically check off every single box, I know I can't fail, right? When I have no clue and no guidance, I can just go and look at this template. When I'm filling out my self-evaluation, I'm mirroring the language, I'm trying to say, hey, at this performance, at this level requires this and this and this. And in the last 6 months, in the last 12 months, I did X, Y, and Z exactly, right? Like, please move me up that ladder, right? And
we're taught this way. Our head of people at Anchorage Digital, Stephanie, she actually kind of explained it best, is like, if career ladders, corporate ladders, were meant to be successful, then all humans would all fall into one bucket and we all would be measured the same way. We're all individuals.
Right.
So our paths are going to be unique, and who best to know your path than your direct leader, who can have that conversation with you and then chart the right impact, chart the right path, create that custom career for you.
No, I think that's exactly right? Because looking back earlier in my career, I would get frustrated in terms of how fast the promotions were happening. And looking back now with this kind of hindsight, I was thinking, well, I wasn't demonstrating impact at all, right? Because I was just mirroring what I thought the career ladder said for my role, for my industry, for my function. And I was just so focused on what was tactical. If my manager asked me, well, what did I contribute to the business or the team, I would struggle, right? Because I was stuck in that paradigm of, well, I'm like level 2, and I did enough projects where that's the expectation for a level 3, so just slot me into level 3, right? And I couldn't, in plain English, explain in the last 12 months what I did that was truly meaningful from a business perspective, right? Outside of my role, outside of my team. And that was my struggle.
And that gets even more complicated the more you move up. So
right.
I remember at eBay, I really hope they don't have this process anymore, but for you to get from a software engineer to a principal engineer, your manager had to write up this document, and literally like a panel of people would read the document, ask questions, and who probably 99% of them have never interacted with you, decide whether you become a principal engineer or not. I would flip that to say, let me take CJ's manager and coach them to use the right judgment and be calibrated on that. And then when they put CJ up for promotion, it works. Versus this panel that adjudicates a decision because you're not calibrated right.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I don't know if eBay still does this, but unfortunately, I know of many of the largest tech companies that do exactly that, right? Where they have promotion panels, they have compensation committees, right? Where they even separate whether you're going to get promoted from how much of a raise you're going to be. And you have two panels to decide. And your manager does have to create this like sweeping presentation or packet. And
Yeah.
it's just a waste of time at the end, right?
And that's the thing that I remember authoring those docs at Amazon, and they had to stand alone and they had to be great and wholesome and whatnot. And I'm just, as I went through all that effort, what about just simply trusting my judgment? Imagine the overhead if they just spent time calibrating at the leadership level, the amount of cycles they would save in dollars could be probably millions.
Oh, guaranteed. Now, I mean, you have quite the impressive career arc. I mean, what was the promotion that you were the most proud of?
Oh, well, I think there's two of them. But one, I think when I moved from senior manager to director at eBay, because the impact was huge. And it, to be honest, I worked my butt off for that promotion. There was a 6 to 7 month period where I was working 60 to 70 hours to manage about 5, 6 projects in parallel to demonstrate that I was capable. But that's what it took. It took that effort. So I was proud of that accomplishment. I think the second one, which was like for me, I've always been someone who's very honest and direct. It was an unexpected promotion. So when I was at Delaga Landon, I joined as a manager, and they promoted me. They did a big reorg, and in that reorg, the objective was to go from like 40, 50 middle management to about 20. And I was the newest and youngest middle manager. So an average tenure was, I believe, 12 years.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm screwed. So that's when I was like, all right, mid-year, let's dust up the resume. Let's be ready to go because I know I'm not lasting. And I went for that interview and I said, here's what you do wrong. And I wouldn't do any of this. I would change it this way. I would change it this way. And they literally like, we like his fresh ideas. We like his different approach, and we're keeping him or promoting him to director.
Wow.
So literally non-conformity, being me, got me that promotion. So I was pleasantly surprised at that. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because it was interesting. I was promoted to director, but my hands were tied on decisions. And when I literally resigned, I think 4 weeks after being promoted. I'm one thing that I do is I tell people, I was like, listen, live by your standards, your moral standards, your ethics, because you got to sleep good at night. And there was an individual they wanted me to hire. I was not bought in. They pushed it. And I told, literally, interesting story. I told my boss, you must send an email in writing saying, I am overriding CJ to hire this individual because this person is not my hire. I do not agree. They did. I responded saying I quit.
Wow. How bad was this guy? How bad was that employee that
he was going to be a direct report of mine. He had been in the company for I think 25 years, and theory wise was great, but in practice did not know all the things that I needed that role to be. And
if you're there 25 years, you probably thought he knew everything too. Probably.
Oh, absolutely. One thing that I didn't realize, and this is why I think transparency, honesty matters. When after I left, they told me that, oh, we wanted to keep that individual because it was a 1-year severance for every 5 years worked. So if you did not keep him, we would have had to pay 5 years salary, and we didn't want to do that. I'm like, information that could have helped day one.
They could have told you before, just put them in a different area. That's it.
Exactly.
Just move over.
That's the funny things you run across in corporate America.
Now, I appreciate your advice because to sum it up, it seems like the best way to really get promoted is to understand the tools that you have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
One, two, just never compromise your own personal ethical values, right? Even when it can be tempting, even when someone presents you a blank check, dangles a fancy title, pay, a cool industry or project. But it's so important to really stay authentic. And through that, demonstrating that authenticity, that good judgment, that's actually where you can demonstrate the impact and make a difference.
Yeah, I would add one more thing. Maybe be aware of your limitations. Like for me, a lot of opportunities that are presented early, people jump on them because they don't know their limitations. And one thing that I love to do is like demonstrate you're capable, then take the role.
Wow. It's not a matter of just thinking that that role or that title or that project is going to be that unlocking kind of catalyst.
Yeah, I firmly believe, and this is why a lot of people that used to report it into me in the larger companies would be like, don't report to CJ's org. Promotions are tough. Yes, because I want to see you successful. So I'm going to make you demonstrate for 3 to 6 months that you're capable before I promote you, so that I'm not having to put you on a performance plan if they have official one or have critical feedback right after promotion because you're not stepping up to the basic bar. I think optimistic promotion kills an organization.
Wow. No, I appreciate that like willingness to kind of be sometimes unpopular, but setting your people up for success and making sure that they're capable and can continue to be successful going forward. I really love that lesson, CJ.
Appreciate it. I hope that it resonates with people because it's something I truly believe in, and people have to understand that, you know, it's the bumps and bruises you get through your career are the ones you learn from, not the success. When you're successful at something, you already know how to do
No, I think that's exactly right.
it.
Thanks for coming on the show,
Listen,
CJ.
thank you so much, CJ.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.